and blackouts. For most of these storms, you would find me hiding, maybe crying, praying, shaking. But now, being a mom, I have turned these storms into great adventures. The other week, we had a bunch of the flooding happened, and our lights at home kept flickering on and off. And it was just Grace and I at home, and I could see with the first flickering, her just complete panic across her face. And so I very quickly went and got the matches and lit all of the candles in the house. And we talked about how much fun it would be if the lights went out and we spent the rest of the evening by candlelight. Her panic soon turned to anticipation and excitement, as we both now knew that we would not be in complete darkness. I've also experienced being afraid of another kind of darkness, the kind of darkness that sucks you in, consumes you, holds you close. Everyone has different struggles, different things in their lives that can lead to a dark place. Mine, from most of you know, mine is my anxiety, which stems from the reality of death of others, death of loved ones, death of myself. And this anxiety and this fear often clouds my mind, turns off the lights, and I find myself in a dark place. I'm sure all of us here in this room have something that can lead us to darkness. Darkness can be a scary place to be. It can be consuming, and it can be all too real in many of our lives. But then there's our reading for today that we just heard, 1 John 1:5. It says, "This, in essence, is the message we hear from Christ and are passing on to you. God is light, pure light. There is not a trace of darkness in God." Not a trace of darkness in God. In my times of darkness, as I'm crying out for light, in my times of darkness, as I struggle to find my way out, how often it is so easy for me to forget these words. God is our light. Nothing can overcome God. Which leads me to my first point for this morning. God's intended purpose for us is to walk in the light of Christ. Desmond Tutu says, "Hope is being able to see that there is light despite all of the darkness." Friends, we find that light in God. Walk in the light of Christ. It's easier said than done, though, right? Like most things. Because it means, walking in the light of Christ means giving over our darkness, giving over our struggles over to God, and trusting that God's got it. And that's hard. I know that's hard, giving over our struggles and our darkness to God. But we hear from this reading that it's so important. Because the next verse in 1 John says, "If we claim that we experience a shared life with God and continue to stumble around in the dark, we're obviously lying through our teeth. We're not living what we claim. For we cannot live in darkness and live in the light of Christ." This is not an easy task also because our world is so filled with darkness. There is darkness all around us, injustices, broken relationships, hateful biases, depression, anxiety, people harming people, environmental abuses, addictions, death. The list goes on and on and on. But we need to invite God into our lives to shine the light of Christ within us so that we then can go and shine that light into the world, into the darkness around us, into the darkness of our neighbors. Our youth are in Houston. They're on their way back, I think, now, but they joined with 30,000 other youth in Houston for the National Youth Gathering. Some of you have kids that are there right now. And the first night, they sang, 30,000 youth sang, a song that probably most of us grew up singing, a song that, if I'm honest, I didn't really think about what I was singing when I was singing these words until now. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. I watched that video, and it was a beautiful thing hearing the youth cry out that they, too, will let the light of Christ shine in their lives. Because, friends, we all are going through something. We all have something going on in our lives, and sometimes we know it, and sometimes we don't know it. And so, part of our job in walking in the light of Christ is to let that light shine within us, but then to also shine that light out to those we come in contact with, our neighbors, those we don't even know, to share that light and the love of Christ with everyone. Which leads me to my next point. God's next intended purpose, to walk humbly, acknowledging that we have sin and that we are no greater than anyone else. To take it a little further, looking into Micah chapter 6, verse 6 to 8, it says, "How can I stand up before God and show proper respect to the high God? Should I bring an armload of offerings topped off with yearling calves? Would God be impressed with thousands of rams with buckets and barrels of olive oil? Would he be moved if I sacrificed my firstborn child, my precious baby, to cancel my sin? But he's already made it plain how to live, what to do, what God is looking for. It's quite simple. Do what is fair and just to your neighbor. Be compassionate and loyal in your love. And don't take yourself too seriously. Take God seriously." Don't take yourself too seriously. I like this version, those wordings, but in other versions it says to walk humbly, humility. This has been something that's been ingrained in my mind as a young athlete from my coaches and my teammates and my parents. Always be humble. You never want to be the person that brags about their accomplishments, only talking about their success, lifting themselves up higher than others, because guess what? Others are doing great things too. As fast as you run the mile, others are doing it faster. As many points as you score in a game, others are doing the same. I was always taught it's okay to celebrate your accomplishments, but don't do so to lift yourself higher than other people. Now, I share this about athletics because I think the same is true for life. God is talking about in Micah about how we are to walk humbly, to remember that we are all sinners and that we are all in need of God's forgiveness. So why is it so easy for us to judge? Why is it so easy for us to make teams? Me versus you, us versus them, they versus we. Aren't we all the same? Aren't we all created by God? Aren't we all loved unconditionally by God? Yes. Humility, being humble, coupled with gratitude, being thankful, creates an attitude that God intended for us, an attitude of knowing and believing that we are no greater than anyone else. This humility that God desires for our lives creates the community that Pastor Dalsing was talking about last week, this community that fights for others to be at the table, this community that strives towards hospitality, fights for justice, welcomes the stranger. This community that opens our eyes to see people for who they are, valuable. The humility that opens our minds to the fact that I am no greater than you. In fact, I cannot be me without you being you. On a trip to South Africa, I learned about this idea called Ubuntu. Nelson Mandela described it as a way of life, a way of community, a way of respect. He said, it's like this. If someone is traveling along the road, they go a great distance, they come to a strange town, they have to stop for the night. That person does not worry about what they eat, for that community welcomes them, makes a place for them at the table, and feeds them. That is Ubuntu community, and it's a beautiful thing. Ubuntu is the message that I am only a person because of other people. Desmond Tutu also said, my humanity is bound up in yours, for we can only be human together. If we dig a little bit deeper into that 1 John reading, verse 9 to 11, it says, anyone who claims to live in God's light and hates a brother or sister is still in the dark. It's the person who loves the brother and sister who dwells in God's light and doesn't block the light for others. Doesn't block the light for others. Friends, when we have the light of Christ within us, we share the light with others and we share the love with others. So first, we're called to walk in the light of Christ, sharing the light of Christ with everyone we meet. And then we go and fight for other people out of kindness, fighting for justice, and in humility. For we know that we are all sinners, and we are all forgiven through Jesus. Our neighbors down the street that make a lot of noise and keep us up at night, I know we all have them. They are also sinners, and they are also forgiven through Christ. We are the same. Our neighbors on the other side of town, our neighbors on the other side of the state, our neighbors on the other side of the country, our neighbors on the other side of the world, we are all sinners. And we are all forgiven through Christ. We are all the same. So let us fight for one another. Let us fight for justice for one another. Let us fight to share the light of Christ into one another's lives, being there for one another, supporting one another. Finally, God's third intended purpose for us this morning is that we walk in the freedom of forgiveness. We all sin, right? We are all forgiven through Christ. Our gospel reading for this morning, I knew I would get there at some point, is from John 1:29. And it says, the very next day, John saw Jesus coming toward him and yelled out, here he is, God's Passover lamb. He forgives the sins of the world. Walk in the freedom of forgiveness. That means we don't hold on to the past. We don't hold on to our sins. We don't let it fester inside of us and keep on building. Trust me, I know it all too well. But as my dad tells me in those times, let it go, flush it down, get rid of it, give it to God. Let God do what God does. God forgives us of our sins and takes it away from us so that we can breathe easier and rejoice and celebrate in the freedom of the forgiveness that we receive through Christ. So how can we today walk in the light of Christ together? Because as we heard last week, it's all about community. This thing we call life is all about relationships. So how can we together walk in the light of Christ? How can we together shine the light of Christ with those around us, in our neighborhoods, in our communities, in our world? How can we together fight the darkness of this world? How can we together fight the darkness in one another's lives? How can we fight for a place at the table for everyone? And how can we embrace our freedom in our forgiveness through Jesus? I encourage us all to think about that this week. I know I'll be thinking about that. And then may we come together and act. Let's go and do something together in community, helping others, shining the light in others' lives, helping others feel that they are loved They are important. They are seen. Because isn't that what God wants us to do? As our children sang last fall, do love, be love, give love. Love one another. So may we go out and live God's intended purpose for our lives, walking in the light of Christ, shining the light of Christ into others, walking humbly and fighting for justice, and walking in the freedom of forgiveness, loving God, loving one another, loving ourselves, loving the stranger, and loving the forgiveness that we receive through Christ. Amen.